Welcome to Carl and Heather Present,
the podcast where we dive into the insights, challenges, and humor of being married to someone who is nothing like you.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Oh, don't you know it's Carl and Heather Present Marriage Podcast.
Welcome to Carl and Heather Present, coming to you from the has-been palatial confines of the hills of Middle Tennessee to what has now been turned into the testosterone-dominated, teenage cave-dwelling, holes-in-the-wall having, urine on all toilet seats, stinky room, and daily yelling bachelor pad. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Why? Wow.
What do you
First
think?
of all, how dare you?
I thought you would be like, way to go, babe.
Well, I'm pretty proud of you. You know, this is your first big time introduction,
Yes.
of the podcast.
And I felt like people needed to see a little glimpse into how sometimes I see our home.
yeah, I felt attacked a little
Do you?
bit. A little
Okay.
bit.
I am surrounded by males, even our
You
dog.
are surrounded by males.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
for sure. I love it.
everyone always says that, oh my gosh, what's it like? But I always say back to them, well, Heather's the queen bee.
Yeah, I love it.
She, she's in charge of the hive.
Yeah, but there are some things, some little interesting things about
the worker bees aren't known for their tidiness or their good bathroom etiquette.
Yeah, so there's that. So I just think about that from time to time. But anyway, so how are you doing, babe? Update us on you.
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to go to Rhode Island.
Okay, first time?
I have never been to Rhode
Yep,
Island
me either.
before, but next week we're this weekend
Mm-hmm.
we're speaking at the Rhode Island Weekend to Remember,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if anybody we're going to Providence.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody knows anything about cool stuff to do in Providence, Rhode Island, like if there's like a trampoline park or like a good Chili's there, let us know.
Right. Or something of historical nature or something maybe we couldn't find here.
That's your cup of tea.
Right,
sure.
right. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to getting some seafood or doing something like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's going to be great. So anyway.
Providence, Rhode Island. I think the world's oldest restaurant or world's oldest bar or
Inn or
something is
tavern
there.
or something
tavern.
like that.
That's what they
Tavern.
call it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
called them taverns in the 1800s or 1700s.
We'll get something in a wooden mug
Yeah.
to drink, Diet Coke in a wooden mug.
Is that dishwasher safe?
Oh, no, probably not.
If you know anything about Rhode Island, reach out to us and let us know.
Yeah.
Let's go to listener comments.
Okay.
One of my favorite times of the show. This review from Apple Podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Carl and Heather are very real and bringing a message of hope to marriages. Listening is a great way to grow in your faith and in your marriage. From Apple Podcasts.
That was nice.
5 stars.
That was awesome.
That was really nice.
Mm-hmm. So nice.
Hey, it's working. We're out here doing it.
Yeah.
So grateful for that. Thank you for saying that, whoever you are. If you're listening and you like what you hear, would you please rate, review, comment, do whatever you can, engage with the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps us get it out to more people. And you can also share it with your friends, which is another great way of getting the message out there. We're so grateful. And this is a ministry that we're all doing together, not just me and you, but everybody that's working on their marriage.
Yeah.
We need each other to make it work. So help us out.
Yeah.
And hopefully this podcast is a help to you.
Absolutely. Well, today I did that intro, which I think you liked, right?
I loved it.
Okay. And I did that because today's episode is all about the men or the guys or the fellas. Speaking of which, side note here. A couple weeks ago, we were out at a speaking event, and we always love it when people give us feedback. And so this particular event, there was an evaluation form that they could fill out. One comment I thought was interesting, was someone was a little bit offended that I used the word girls to describe a session that we had with just the females. And so it was like we're going to do a session with just the females. And I said, we're going to have some girl talk. So girls, come on in here.
Okay.
And she just said, I am not a girl. I am a lady.
Yeah.
And so
I'm a grown woman.
Curious. Yeah, I'm a grown woman. I'm curious if that is maybe something that's prevalent that I missed out on, or if it's unique to her situations. Or like, do you ever think if I would understand? Now, I guess if I look at it from you, if I called you a boy, If I'm like, hey, boys, y'all come in here versus like a man or a guy or a fella.
I literally had somebody tell me one time, there were two guys that I knew, and they were working on something,
Yeah.
and I saw them, and I walked up to them, and I said, hello, boys, what's going on? And one of them looked up at me, and he said, if you see a boy, you slap a boy.
What?
And I was like,
What does
what are
that
you
mean?
talking about? But it was the same thing. He was like, don't call me a boy.
Don't call me a boy. Call me a man.
like, so I slapped the crap out of him.
No, you did not.
And then I said, you will address.
No.
I was like,
just curious.
sure.
Yeah.
Then I turned around and got in my car and drove off.
Well, I just think here's the thing I think about that. Sometimes it's good to ask more questions because you could be just saying something that's like real happy. Like I don't have anything invested in calling somebody a girl versus
Not
a
even
gal
a little bit.
or a
Yeah.
lady or whatever. And so
Or
sometimes
like an old windbag or something
I'm
like
probably
that.
not going to do that.
Okay,
right?
so there
Right.
are rules.
There are rules,
Okay.
but I think that like sometimes I could learn from those things. I was just curious. So anybody listening, and you're like, yeah, I get that. I'd rather be called a lady than a girl or that kind of thing.
I'd like people to comment more on your Southern accent. That's also
That was the
been a
that came
thing.
up. We'll save that for another episode. How about
Okay.
that? We'll save that one for another episode.
If
okay?
you like listening to Heather talk, or if you don't like it,
Yeah, either way, I'm okay with it. I
Okay.
mean, I've had this accent for 50 years. I don't think it's going to change at this
a
point. So
minute,
anyway, back to today's episode. We have asked the guys or the males, right?
yeah,
Listeners and some of your close friends. So some of our listeners, some of your close friends, and some of those are both.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us some insights into the inner world of men, which I love. And I think it's so helpful for a couple reasons. For women, it helps us to hear and really better understand our husbands, you guys. And I think for the men, it's helpful because I'm guessing that these are not questions that you just sit around and talk about, right? Like until you've asked these guys.
no, I never knew this stuff about my buddies until I said, hey,
Right.
give me your thoughts on these questions.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing that we noticed is that you felt like, hey, I'm not alone in this. There's like a consistent theme throughout this.
Yeah.
And then B, it was really insightful, I thought, to say, hey, are these things that I'm being made aware of? And these are some really good thoughts, really good things that you would want to know. And so here's what we did. We asked the question, what's one thing you wish somebody would have told you before you got married?
Yeah.
What's one thing you wish somebody would have told you before you got married? I want to talk about the answers, and then I want to ask you some questions, babe, to help us gather a little more insight, because as the women, we want to be wise. We want to be wise, just people in general. And Proverbs 20, verse 5 says, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. So I want to be a person of understanding. As a wife, we want to be women of understanding. And so I'm going to work to draw it out. So
You're
let's
going
go.
to draw it out of me in this episode.
I am. Yep. So first answer we got, one of the answers was, what's one thing you wish somebody would have told you before you got married? And it's assume the best about your spouse. Assume the best about your spouse. So unpack that for me a little bit. What does that mean, and why is that important?
Well, I think it's a pretty on the nose answer. The setup is you're going to have things that make you question whether or not this person is for me or is my spouse on my side. Depending on how you are in your emotional mind and your level of trust and stuff like that, that can ebb and flow. That can go back and backwards and forwards. But putting up this constant reminder to you, I'm going to assume the best about my spouse. I chose this person. We're married to each other. I am going to be predisposed to have a posture of hope and belief about their intentions. Now, some people are more easily predisposed to be that way than others. Like some people are impulsively not easily trusting. They don't trust everybody or everything. I understand that. I can be that way. I think one way to preserve unity and just to like set yourself up to win is to believe, hey, I'm going to believe the best about my spouse. That's just like a pretty general thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you happen to be married to somebody who has over and over and over and over and over again abused trust,
Right.
that's a different thing. But as a piece of advice that somebody said, what would you wish somebody would have told you? Hey, believe the best about this person. You chose them.
Yeah.
Have a posture of hope and belief about who they are in your relationship.
Yeah.
Especially when
That's good.
conflict happens.
That's really good. And I think you are a very trusting person. I think that probably in the relationship,
I have a hard time believing you. When
I'm
you
the
say
one. No. I think I'm the one that's a little more, it takes me time
Yeah.
trust is earned kind of thing.
Yeah, so, yeah.
But believing the best, or assuming the best about your spouse, that's good. Okay. Here's the next one. What's one thing you wish somebody would have told you before you got married? I wish someone would have told me that sex wasn't going to happen nearly every day, and nearly was
Yeah.
in quotes, which I think was maybe sarcastic a little bit, like nearly every day. That's kind of a joke.
Right.
And so the whole idea of just sex and what it's going to be like, and what we think it'll be like, and then what it's actually like. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think nobody talks, for the Christian who has determined in their heart, and I think it's a good determination that we're going to like abstain sexually before we get married. Well, that kind of sets you up. It rigs you to also not talk about sex and not have conversations about sex that, it feels scandalous. And then all of a sudden with the flip of a switch,
Right.
it's all good. And you're supposed to do this thing that has been taboo, and you're not supposed to talk about it
Right.
Before. So a lot of times you go into marriage
Yeah.
with these expectations about what's going to be like. What's sex going to be like? Well, and a lot of times you're different creatures sexually. So I got these expectations that I've got in my mind,
Right.
but I've never talked about them. And you got these expectations that you've got in your mind, and you've never talked about them, because we have to have, even I think for married people, I think married people would do themselves a favor by talking about sex at times other than when they want to have it or when they're having it, like just like you don't work on a car while you're driving it.
Right.
Talk about, say, hey, what's expectations? Because the biggest problem with expectations, especially around like intimate and emotional things, is we have expectations. All of us think, yeah, well, I would like to have sex 3 times a day.
Right.
And the other person might be like, well, I want to have it once a month.
Right.
But no one has brought that up.
Right.
Neither one of us have, No, we don't have it as much as I'd like to, and I'm disappointed. But I'm disappointed because I have an unmet expectation, but mainly because I have not expressed that expectation, or just let you know. Maybe if I want to have it this many times, and I tell you, you're like, hey, how about split the difference? I'll meet you in the middle. But like it's getting better because of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I wish someone would have told me about what my expectations of sex would be. That's a real good one. And you and I had a ton of problems with that early on.
Absolutely. And I think for us, we had premarital counseling. I think a lot of people put a lot of eggs in the basket of premarital counseling.
Yeah.
I think postmarital counseling, like a lot of the issues, I mean, sex is one of them, but even just like communication, living with someone else, combining finances. You can talk about these things, but it's not until the rubber meets the road and you're actually doing those things that the problems surface.
Yeah.
And then you're living with two selfish people or living together, and there can be this implosion, in addition to all these people coming up to you saying, how do you like being married?
Are you having fun?
And you want to say some days, man, I hate it. I feel like it was the worst decision I've ever made. Can I go back on that? That kind of thing, because you feel that way, but you don't feel the freedom to have conversations. And so I think, especially for those of us within the church, if we would start having conversations about like, hey, let's have a postmarital group or newly married groups. I know some pastors and people have newlywed groups. And I think that's so great, because we've got to have safe spaces to have those conversations.
Well, it's really gets at something that we talk a lot about on this podcast, and that is living with friendships and relationships and having like pure relationships. Like maybe you've just got somebody in your life that you're talking about, hey, you guys have been married about the same long time, about the same amount of time as us.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Right.
You know, having those peer relationships and then having couples that you look up to that are a little bit further ahead, but being in relationship with them and in enough of relationship with them to where if you're having, you know, some sort of challenge relationally, emotionally, sexually, you have somebody to talk to about it.
Right.
And you have somebody to talk to about it together. That's the secret sauce of making this stuff work. You know, having somebody that can mirror your blind spots, which is what a good peer relationship does. And then also somebody who can forecast for you your future, not because they're a prophet or magical. They're just a little bit further down the road than you are. And then they can call back to you and say, hey, I see you're about to come around this, you know, this mile marker or this. Be careful here when you get to this stage. So having those relationships is another way of navigating some of these challenges that come up. And that really gets back to who are we talking with about this? Are we talking,
Yeah, that's so good. So good. So we're going to have conversations. Okay. This is one that I love. And it was, what do you wish somebody would have told you before you got married? Laugh a lot. Why is that important? Why is it important to laugh a lot?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite lines ever written in literature is in the book East of Eden. And it was a description of this woman.
I know what you're going to say.
And this woman, Steinbeck described her, it says, she was as humorless as a shoe. And like, in that piece of writing,
Yes.
I know a crap ton about that lady.
Right.
You know,
and
about that
he
character.
painted a picture for us that one short sentence, we all knew exactly what he was saying when he said that.
Right.
Yeah.
She was as humorless as a shoe. And every now and then I will meet somebody or be around somebody that either takes themselves so seriously and they posture and, you know, and like their world is so like, you know, orchestrated and they think it needs to be, and the perception of themselves needs to be a certain way. I like that. It makes me think, don't be humorless. Just be open to joy and levity and lightness of heart.
Right.
And when things are invariably going to come your way that will undo you,
Yes.
please laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Learn to laugh at it. That's one of the things I think about us that makes us work a little bit better. When I think about what I would miss about you, obviously, first thing, your boobs. But then second thing is humor. And like just we laugh and we have, we just have fun together.
Yeah.
And that's an easy one, but it's actually, I think it's a spiritual gift because humor and laughing and being able to tune the environment of your life against the circumstances that you have. Circumstances come and go, that's given.
Right.
How you interact with them and embrace them and how you do it together. If it's funny, laugh at it, you know?
Yeah.
I like that one.
I love it. I remember we were spending the night. We had moved out of town and we came back into town and we stayed with our good friends, Jason and Susan. And I remember we were staying in their, I think it was what would be soon their daughter's room. And none of us had kids. And we would go to bed every night hearing them laugh, like over and over and over again. And they were just some of the funniest people. And they laughed and they taught us early on in our marriage, like, hey, let's laugh together.
Isn't that right? What a nice thing to remember.
It was beautiful.
I will never forget that.
I won't forget it.
I love them.
I won't forget it. So, okay. So another thing that one of our listeners and your friends said is be the first to apologize.
Yeah, I ain't doing that.
Okay. You want to move the next one then? Yeah. Okay. Why is that important? Why do you need to be the first to apologize?
I think it's just a posture of humility. Just being the bigger man or the bigger woman is, I think that's good advice to have a posture of humility.
Yeah.
It's like, look, this is, you know, you screwed up or this is a mess. I'm sorry for my part. Can we work towards repair?
Yeah.
We got here for a reason. There may not be excuses, but we got here for a reason. We got to this conflict. We got to this offense.
Yeah.
For a reason, and both of us had a role to play. So maybe they're just saying be the first to apologize. It's just like have a posture of humility with your spouse.
Yeah. I think there's nothing more disarming than when you're coming at somebody for something that they've done. And probably your thought is, I'm ready for a fight. They're going to come back at me. And when someone just says, I'm so sorry, it's unsettling in a way that causes you, I think, to think about your own part that you played in that. But at the end of the day, the reality is that Jesus doesn't call us to do that so that we'll get a response from somebody else. He causes us to do that because that's what he's done for us.
Yeah.
You know, he offered us forgiveness, not because we deserved it or because we've earned it or because we didn't do wrong things, but because he loves us. And so I think that's a good thing. Okay. Love them when you don't feel like you're getting it in return.
Yeah.
That's advice that somebody wished that they would have been told. And so let's talk about that. Seasons of maybe times in your life with your spouse where maybe you're not feeling like they're very loving or they're very kind or you don't feel like you're getting that in return. How do you do that? Why is that important?
Love, famous read it at your wedding, 1 Corinthians 13.
Yep.
Love is patient and kind. I think those are first because there's a first, at least in my mind, those are like, hey, work on this part first.
Yeah.
Because impatience and harshness tend to be like where I can impulsively go. And those are responses that like I will have if I feel like I didn't get what I gave. You didn't do your part, so I'm mad about it. It's like a transactional love. We talk about like, is marriage a contract?
Yeah.
If marriage is a contract, do not sign it.
Right.
It is the worst business arrangement of all time.
Why do you say that? You've said that before. Why do you say that? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, because a contract is obligating both of us to these terms. Now, if I don't keep my side of the terms, then you can say, hey, you didn't keep your side of the terms. I'm not bound by this contract anymore. I'm out.
Yeah.
Marriage is an agreement between you and I that says no matter what happens to you in sickness and in health, in richer or poorer, over and above our circumstances or over and above your performance,
Right.
I promise to love you.
Yeah.
That's a different thing than a contract.
It's a bad deal. Contract. If it's a contract.
If it's a contract,
Yeah.
it's a real bad deal. And that's why getting married to somebody is a very sobering responsibility. It's like sometimes, like even in the songwriting world, like I've signed contracts before and I took it to an attorney and I'm like, is this a good deal? Should I do this?
Yeah.
And, like worried about, and you write your name on that paper, even the contract, we take it seriously. Take getting who you get married to 10x more seriously because you're signing up for something that obligates you to way more than contractual obligations. You're saying, no matter what, as long as I live, I'm going to love this person, not based on their commitment to me, but purely based on I'm going to love them like Christ loved.
That's great. I love that. Okay. Next answer comes from probably one of our wisest friends. And when we talked about this, all this is anonymous, but this is a really wise friend that said this. Okay. He said, become a lifelong learner of your spouse. Be curious, ask questions, be inquisitive. When you feel judgment coming on, trade judgment for curiosity. Talk a little bit about that.
I learned this from you. I learned it from our friend. You get people to like you and they feel like you like them when you ask them questions about themselves.
Yeah.
I see it happening all the time. When our boys were little, you taught them to ask questions of adults. And they were always so precocious. They just did what you told them to do. So they would meet adults and they would ask the adults questions about themselves. And then the adults would always say back to us, your kids are so smart. They're so engaging. I just love being around them. Well, of course you do, because they were asking you questions about yourself.
Right.
Well, now I see it backfiring when our boys are around young ladies. They ask them questions about themselves.
Yes.
That other teenage girls that they're around, they're like, hey, tell me about your hair. Where'd you get that pretty dress?
Yeah.
Oh, you go to school there? I go to school there.
Yeah,
It's like all that stuff. They want to, it draws people out. So it's like a blueprint. I've seen you do it so many times. We have a couple other friends who are wonderful at this. If you want to draw somebody out, if you want to make somebody feel like you like them, especially your spouse, draw them out with some questions.
Right.
You can write, I'll give you 5 questions.
Yeah.
That would be like a blueprint for just drawing somebody out. Just
Yeah.
a little bit more, one leads to the next.
Right.
Ask people questions about themselves. That's just good on everything for your spouse or for anybody. If you're a teenage boy, you're listening to this for some weird reason.
Sorry, moms. No, but do you not think too, like I love that, the follow-up to that, especially like with a spouse, like that's a party trick with a stranger. But with a spouse, I think like that whole ask questions, be inquisitive, it goes with the next statement that he said was that when you feel judgment coming on, trade judgment for curiosity. It gives you better insight into that person and their motives, when sometimes I think it's going back to maybe that believe the best. We might think you did this because you're this way, or because you always do that, or those sorts of negative statements that we make.
Yeah.
But it gives us better insight into their heart.
Well, this same person also had another piece of advice that I'm going to go ahead and bring up. And it said this: be interested, not interesting.
Say that again.
Be interested, not interesting.
Okay.
And that's another, it's just like, okay, especially guys, like I do this all the time. Like, I listen to this podcast and I'll pontificate for 30 minutes on whatever, this person says. And you're so kind to listen to me. But I think, man, I am being so interesting now because I just want to talk to you about what I'm interested in.
Sure. Yeah.
But if I want to draw you out, and I feel like you might need something from me that I can't give you, I might try to be interesting to try and help you.
Yeah.
But really what I need to do is be interested in what's going on with you and draw you out in that way, kind of like what you're trying to do to me in this podcast.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. Be interested instead of interesting. So let me ask you this as we're wrapping up. These were some great questions and really thoughts that we got from our listeners and from your friends. But how does all this intersect with the gospel? Can you not just have, hey, here's my relationship with Christ, and then here's my marriage. My relationship with Christ is my own thing. My marriage is its own separate thing.
Yeah.
We talk about this at the end of every episode. How does this intersect with the gospel?
Yeah.
So help me understand that.
Well, my one buddy, when I asked him about this, he said, dude, I don't know. He said, I know one thing. He said that marriage has been a sanctification machine for me. Because when I went into marriage, it exposed so much in my life that how selfish I was, how dependent on my own ideas and strategies and things like that I can be, and how I'm out for my own way. He's like, that's what marriage did in me. And a lot of times people get married and they think about it in terms of what they'll get for themselves out of it. Maybe I'll be happier. Maybe I'll be smarter. Maybe I'll unite the clans and be richer. Marriage is a massive sanctification machine. If you don't want to be sanctified, don't get married.
Yeah.
It puts so much light on you, but not like a spotlight, more like an X-ray. It shows you what you are on the inside, and it helps purify you and heat you up and make you into something more than you could ever be. I think the end result is you come out like gold and you get refined.
Right.
But the process of being heated up and the dross scraped off and heated up again and refined and being purified, that ain't easy.
Right.
And so it's like, husbands, love your wife like Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And you can also, just hear that and think, how in the world am I ever going to do that? But that's Ephesians 5, and also says, no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it like Christ does the church. We're members of a body together. I want to learn how to nourish and cherish you because that's at least how I would want to be treated.
Right.
As myself, nobody should hate their own body,
Right.
and I want to treat you in that same way. Christ loved the church; He gave Himself up for it. It's a process of being heated up and purified and sanctified to get to the point where that makes sense. That doesn't make sense in a contract.
Right.
It does make sense in a covenant promise.
I love it. Well, that's Ephesians 5. That's a great place, I think, to finish today. And we're going to be hitting how that applies to women next week. That Ephesians 5.
I thought we were going to do
that.
like part 2 for the guys.
No, just part 1. You're done. We're going to hear from the ladies, the women, not the girls. We're going to hear from the ladies next week. Yeah. So thanks, babe, for sharing. Thank you guys for listening. Hey, I love you so much.
I love you too.
Glad to do this with you. Together on Purpose.
Together on Purpose.
It's Carl and Heather.